Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and this is the weekly live stream where we talk about anything to do with employment, careers, job search, getting hired, that kind of stuff. Job interviews, networking, resumes, all that stuff. Job offers, negotiation. It's all mixed together into a beautiful type gumbo. So this is an interactive live stream, so if you are here, you should see a chat box somewhere soon, somewhere in the vicinity of my face. And get in the chat box. Let me know what you're wondering about. Let me know what you're struggling with, and I will try and help you out. The title of today's episode is Why Do You Want to Work Here? Best answer. And are recruiters ghosting you? So this is episode number 97. We are going to be covering both of those topics, probably in reverse order, but first off, I have to say a public shout out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. My super thanks donors. You guys are awesome. My Patreons and my participants, people that show up and ask questions and interact. So just to kick things off, we're going to talk about ghosting, right? That was one of the things we're going to cover today in the title. Are you being ghosted? This is something that I don't know. This happens a lot, and it's very, very disappointing. And I think about 10 years ago, the world sort of shifted in the direction of doing this as a commonplace kind of thing. So just so we all know what ghosting is, that's when you apply for a job and you send in your application, and either you never hear anything back, these people don't respond to communication, or you have already initiated some kind of exchange with the recruiter or the hiring manager or the receptionist or somebody on the other end, and you're having a back and forth kind of exchange over emails or voicemail or some other means of communication, and they just stop. They just drop off the face of the planet and never respond to you again. That's ghosting. These people just disappear. And as I said, if you have experienced that, it turns out you're normal, because this is now a very common practice. This did not used to be the case, but it's the case now. And in fact, I would say that you can expect this as a regular thing if you are a candidate that's applying to many jobs, especially if you're dealing with recruiters. This is really kind of how people operate. It's very surprising and very disappointing. And if you're new at this, or you're young and you don't have a lot of experience job searching, you might be thrown by this. You might think like, oh my God, is something wrong with me? Or am I just dealing with really weird people? Or what's the deal? The answer is there's nothing wrong with you. And you could be dealing with some weird people, but as it turns out, a lot of regular people behave like this too, apparently. So that's not necessarily the case. For those of you that you're not in careers like sales, okay, this is more of a known quantity to people who work in sales and stuff. You know, you throw a lot of stuff out there, and the default response is silence. The exception is where you hear something back, right? Either positive or negative. It's an exception to the rule if you get a response. That's how things usually work in things like sales. In the world of networking, that's also kind of a thing, right? You could propose something, you could invite people to an event or whatever, and if you don't receive a response, that's generally understood to be a soft no, okay? People will respond if they choose to accept or to engage or to go deeper with you, but generally the way they operate is that's just a standard way of saying no. And that is known, and it is accepted, and it is even built into the etiquette and protocol of these interactions. So if you're coming from that world, you will understand this, and you will know to expect it, and you know what it means. If you're new at this might kind of throw you, because if you think that this is kind of an unprofessional way to behave, I can't tell you you're wrong. It is basically an unprofessional way to behave, especially to people who are not expecting that kind of treatment. They don't move in circles where they would encounter this type of behavior pattern. So that's ghosting. So hopefully everybody understands what ghosting is now. There's other kinds of ways that people will do this. I call it soft ghosting. If they've ever given you a response saying the position is on hold, right? If you've ever heard that one before, I know a lot of you have. You apply for a job. They say we're accepting applications. You send your application in using the channel that they told you to send it to, right? So they give you an email address or whatever. You send your application to that email address. And either you get a response saying it's on hold, or when you follow up with it, people say I'm sorry, the position is on hold. You might have come down for a couple of interviews by this point. You've already gone in for a job interview, and maybe the process is they do 1, 2, 3 or more rounds of job interviews. That is a thing for a lot of jobs, especially higher level jobs. So you might have already done an interview. And the natural thing to do would be to contact the recruiter and say, thank you for having me come down for an interview. I appreciated that. It was a pleasure meeting you guys. And if you should need any information, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I'm just wondering if I will be hearing from you in the near future, something like that. That would be a sort of default kind of message you might send in. But then you find that these people drop off the face of the planet. They don't respond. You might try and get them on the phone. They don't respond. They're always unavailable. You might leave a voice message or several voice messages. They never respond, right? That's ghosting, right? So this is common. Or if they do ghost, they say something like, I'm sorry, the position is on hold, or something equally cryptic, which doesn't really make sense to you. That can be a form of soft ghosting. They're still there, but they're unresponsive. Okay? Now, first of all, I think I know what a lot of people are going to say is that that's unprofessional. And yes, it is. I agree with you. Usually only at lower level jobs, you encounter this behavior. If you're going for an upper middle management type position, most of the time they won't treat you like this. Usually people at those levels tend to be a little bit more professional. The first thing I want you to know is that if any of this sounds familiar to you, you have done nothing wrong, okay? There is nothing you should be reading into their response that indicates to you that there's something wrong with you, or there's something about your qualifications or anything you have on your resume that's a problem. There's nothing about the method you're choosing to communicate with or over. None of that is an issue, okay? So if that's what you're thinking, I'm here to tell you that you're deriving the wrong conclusion from it. This is just, something else is going on. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And I also want to say that sometimes you may have dodged a bullet. So don't feel too bad about it, because there are a lot of awful employers out there, and there's a lot of awful recruiters out there. Some of them are very, very good. Some more of them are decent, and even more are, in my experience, pretty bad and unprofessional. So it might not necessarily be a bad thing. It may not feel like it, but it could be a blessing in disguise. I just want to throw that out there. I want to briefly respond to a couple of comments here. Thank you guys for getting in the chat. Hello to Bob. Julia says, hi, Bill. Your videos helped me land a job as a lab technician 2 years ago. Thank you. Well, you're absolutely welcome, Julia. And thank you for letting me know that. It's good to get feedback on these things. Congratulations. Bob says, in the late 90s, I get ghosted by a large corporation after my interviews. After that, I just expected never to hear from anyone ever again after each interaction with a prospective employer. Yeah, if you're prepared to not hear anything back, I think you're going to be fine. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I wouldn't say you can expect never to hear back as a default thing all the time, but if you are okay not hearing anything back, you're not going through all kinds of mental turmoil over it, I think you've got the right idea. Julia says, I agree with you. It's most often not about the applicant. It's the employer's own problem. Yes, it is. It's the way they operate. Okay, so we're going to get back into the chat in a second, but I just want to finish off an overview of this. A couple of things everybody needs to know about ghosting, okay? If you knew what was happening on the other end, you would feel a lot better about being ghosted. You would realize that it's not any kind of statement that you're doing something wrong, or that you're unemployable, or that you don't have any value, or that it's inappropriate to apply for these jobs. You would realize that none of that stuff is true, okay? Usually what's going on, especially these days when you apply for a job that's posted on the internet, first of all, some of those jobs are actually fake. I'm not sure exactly how many. It could be 30%, it could be less, it depends who you talk to. But they're not actually real jobs, so they're not going to respond. They're playing some little game. They're trying to see who's out there, who's looking for jobs. There's other more nefarious stuff. So some of them, like those, obviously, you're probably not going to hear back from. So obviously that's no reflection on you. Then, of the legitimate jobs that are out there, that are posted on the internet, okay, because it's so easy, generally speaking, to apply for a job on the internet, you get a lot of applicants, okay? Think about it. You could apply for many jobs in a day. And if you did that every day, you could apply to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs easily. So a lot of people are out there doing that. A lot of times they're applying for jobs that they're completely not qualified for at all, right? Like it's just a sort of nuisance application because this person doesn't even have one of the things that they asked for in the list of requirements, right? So that is a thing. That's also what's going on. So because of that, the recruiters are getting a huge volume of applications. Now, some of them choose to handle that with an automated computer system that takes the applications and does the initial filter, okay? Sometimes these systems are semi-intelligent and they can respond with a default email. You can program all that in and they can do it. Sometimes that feature is there, but people don't use it. Sometimes the feature is not there. Okay, it depends how you do it. Other times, the recruiter doesn't go through that type of software known as ATS software. Sometimes it just goes to somebody's inbox, and their inbox can get overwhelmed, especially in smaller companies. This is a thing. So it's, if you ever gotten, 200 emails in a day, you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to stay on top of. And what some people do is they will just, look at your email for like literally 5 seconds and then decide what to do with it, whether it gets rejected or it gets processed further. So you're getting all of these things happening on the other end. But the point is that you're going in with a lot of competition, okay? Posted jobs get a lot of candidates applying. And because of that, that's what's directly and indirectly led to the situation where the recruiter ghosting a candidate is very common, okay? If 500 candidates apply for a job, and you're one of those 500 candidates, statistically, you have a 0.2% chance of getting the job, right? If you're up against 499 other people, you have a 1 in 500 chance statistically of getting that job, right? Now, obviously there are other factors, but that gives you an idea of like the starting point for this, okay? Some people will have a higher chance because they're more qualified. Other people will have a lower chance, but you see what you're up against, okay? So that's why, you usually don't hear back. Now, I've gotten the question before, should I contact someone else at the organization? And I did a video years ago on my channel where I talked about my personal experience doing this years ago, where I actually did get a job, but I was ghosted a couple of times. It was a sort of hiring process from hell. I did 9 interviews with a company. That's not normal, and that's not typical. But it was a case of I got ghosted halfway through the process, and it turns out that the recruiter that was in the process of recruiting me left the company halfway through the process. Didn't say a word to me. So they weren't there anymore. So I did contact the company and I did find this out and I did continue the process with somebody else. So that's an example of the types of things that can happen. But the most likely scenario is that you should not follow up with somebody else at the company. It's not the best use of your time. The only time I would ever recommend that is if this is like a dream job that you're really into and you want to go absolutely as far as you go with this, then maybe. But as a standard procedure, it's not worth trying to, if you're ghosted, trying to contact the company and try and, talk to somebody else. That's what I would say. The reality is that sometimes, and I'm not making excuses for recruiters, but it sometimes can be very impractical to respond to every applicant with an email that says no in a semi-tactful way. It's just not practical. Recruiters are hired and they work multiple positions at once, and each of those positions is getting hundreds of candidates, and it's just not practical to respond to everyone. So I hate to say this, but don't expect a response. Okay, they've received your application. Either they're incompetent or they're not, but either way, that's all you should do. What you should do for yourself is move on and pursue other opportunities, including opportunities that don't involve posted jobs on the internet. Okay, there are many ways to get a job. Make sure you're doing more than one thing. Okay, that's my spiel about ghosting. Let's go back to you guys. Okay, Amazed says, I've been ghosted by recruiters for reputable mid-senior positions before. It often leaves a bad taste in the mouth about those recruiters and the organizations at large. Thanks. Yeah. Listen, it boggles the mind, and maybe your mind has been boggled in the past, seeing just how incompetent and unprofessional some people are that have jobs. You know what I mean? And I have personally seen a lot of that in the HR organization. Not to go on a rant or anything, but first of all, I wholeheartly agree with you. Secondly, I'm not surprised at all. Thirdly, it's always seemed strange to me how people would choose to work in the HR organization, but yet are no good with people. And we see a lot of that. I don't understand it. It's like in sales, if you are no good with people, but you choose to go into sales, usually that problem solves itself because you're not particularly effective. And so one way or another, you get weeded out of sales, right? It's just a matter of time. In HR, personally, anecdotally, I don't see that natural checks and balance system working. I see people that are just not good at dealing with people, working in HR in like many different roles in HR, and just staying there for decades. Like I've seen that. And I always wonder, because traditionally I've not been very good with people. That's one of my drawbacks. I'm very strong technically. The whole soft skills is always where my weaknesses are. But some people are way worse than me, and they work in jobs where they're dealing with people all day long. And it's like, why? Why inflict that upon the world? Julia says, recently I was contacted about a technical safety advisor role at the same university. I avoided giving a salary number during the call, saying I'm happy with the posted range. Yeah, you don't discuss salary till the very end, right? You don't discuss it. They may try to get you to discuss it, but you don't say anything about it, right? You just say it's fine, right? Whatever they put out. Yeah. That's why I'm here. Yeah, that's somewhere in there. Whatever. That's fine. That's all I can tell you right now. Here you go. Maganon, JR Arranger, right? That just rolls off the tongue. Says, shout out from the Philippines. Right on. Shout out to Manila or wherever you are. Julia says, now I have an interview in a week, but the process feels backwards. They've already contacted my references before the interview and seems to... Really? They've contacted your references before the interview? That's interesting. Usually that's not how we do things. and seem to be expediting a decision, possibly preparing a contract. Okay, well, I hope that that's what's going on. I hope that they're putting a rush on it and gearing up to hire you. Because usually you don't check references before you're finished interviews. If you're doing an interview, by definition, you're not sold on the candidate yet. But if you're not sold on someone, why are you doing all this extra work in starting to check out their background? Julia says, the manager said it's a new role, but couldn't clearly explain daily responsibilities. Okay, that's interesting. That's not necessarily a red flag, but it can be in some contexts. You could get a boss that delegates a lot, or it's a new position and they don't have all the details. And it could be a position where they expect you to have a lot of initiative and determine how you do your role. You know, they're not going to dictate it to you like you're a slave and stand over your shoulder. They're going to give you some sort of area of responsibility where you figure out what you do, right? What makes the most sense. It also, you know, like I'm used to working in smaller companies. In smaller companies, not every process is documented and planned out and approved beforehand. You know, a lot of times you're making up a lot of the details as you go along. If you have someone in a role and they leave and then you hire a replacement, the new person may change the role a little bit because maybe they have a greater affinity working with other people around, or less of an affinity of working with them than the predecessor had, right? So you can sort of change how the processes work. Maybe this person could take over that process and the replacement could handle this entirely new process. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily a red flag. If it was a big, formal, mature organization, then you know, it might be a bit of a red flag. Okay, they couldn't clearly define. They will also be able to see my current salary when HR searches it. I'm considering asking for 80. Listen, something that everyone should know, okay? This is nothing to do with ghosting. We're talking about salary now, but whenever you jump, whenever you go from one job to another, okay, there is always risk. The risk is that the new position won't work out. It has been known that people can make an offer to you and then they either rescind the offer after you've accepted it and maybe given your old employer notice or something, or you leave completely. You start at the new job and 2 weeks later they say, I'm sorry, it's not working out, or we have to lay off people, so sorry, you're gone. This job doesn't exist anymore. That also is a thing. So it's risky to give up something you have. If you've been in a job for years, you're tolerating it, you're making good money, but someone's offering you money to jump to something else. All things being equal, you need to be compensated for the risk, because there is a chance that you could lose both, right? So in order for it to be worthwhile to you, the new job always has to pay more than your current job, or else it doesn't make sense. You'd be assuming a lot of risk for the same money. You know what I mean? So all things being equal, there should be a premium that you make, right? Julia says, how should I approach this interview given the unclear role, like salary negotiation and the salary info? Like, okay, well, if you're wanting me to explain salary negotiation from scratch and go through the whole thing, I just can't, okay? That's a big topic. So just saying, like, how would I go about it? It depends on a lot of details. Knowing what to do depends on what the situation is, and it's going to vary. I could give you very general stuff, but it's going to be almost useless because you can't go by general rules. You have to look at what's specifically going on in your situation. You know what I mean? We'd have to know the details of your current situation and the thing that you're going to. Okay, now, I can get into that in a future live stream, and I've got a lot of videos on my channel that cover that. Okay, but start with the, I think I have some videos specifically on salary negotiation. I think I did an hour-long video simply titled Salary Negotiation. So check that out. B. Cyrus, is that how you say that? Says, I'm a little confused. I got called for a third interview. I'm not sure what to expect on a third interview. yeah, those are not uncommon. Okay. Like, now, if it's a minimum wage job at a gas station, you're not going to get a third interview. You know what I mean? You're lucky if you get one, or, you could barely call it an interview sometimes. But for a lot of management type positions, a third interview is quite common. It usually goes even further because, you see, they have to vet you, and they start with vetting, like the first filter is like just taking out people that are just completely inappropriate, right? And then of the contenders, then they look into them and see if they've got the skills and the requirements, right? That's one part of it. And then of all the people that have, like, they can do the job, they have the experience, they have the skills, they have the training, then the question becomes your work style and your personality and your opinions and your approach, right? Because if you're going to be making decisions, right, then everyone who would be working with you, all the superiors, they would want to probably meet you and put in their 2 cents, because whoever is hired has to work closely with them or has to work occasionally with them, and they want to have their say. So the first interview might be a screening interview. The second one might be like, let's assess your background and your suitability to do the job. And then the third one might be more, let's meet all the bosses and see if our personalities click, right? Like, that's a common thing, okay? I don't know what job you're going for. I'm just saying that's like, third interviews are not a thing. The other thing is that sometimes they signal that the person who did the second interview is not completely trusted by their superior, right? Like, yeah, I know you can assess this and that, but I want to be able to meet them first. I want to be able to give my input to this before you extend them an offer, right? So sometimes it can signal that. The other thing it can signal is that it's an organization where people are really not given any initiative. Every single little thing has to be approved by many superiors. It goes up the chain. Those are usually not great organizations to work for, where it's built into the culture that they do not want initiative. Everything has to be approved. Everything has to be sort of signed off, right? And those decisions always tend to bottleneck through the superiors, right? So it could be a signal, potentially, that it's maybe that type of organization. But hey, if they pay well and you want to do the job, why not? So it could be any of those things, but it's not weird or abnormal. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. I told you, I went through a process. I had 9 interviews for a job. 9. Stupid, but I did get the job at the end of it. So I'm not sure what that means, but I talked to a series of people that had like no power, So it kind of follows that then you have to have another interview with somebody else, because that person just didn't have the power to say, nope, you're hired, welcome aboard. They didn't have the authority to do that. So, you know what I mean? It's just stupid. B Cyrus says, thank you, FI. It's a city job. Okay. Yep. Well, that's consistent, right? Government, generally speaking, has a reputation of being bureaucratic and slow moving. But on the flip side, the other thing that goes with the general reputation of government jobs is that they pay well and they're secure. So maybe it's worth entertaining them. Let's see here. You're welcome, Julia. And B. Cyrus. Julia says, thanks, Bob. I'm sure we're talking to Bob. Michael says, hello, Michael. Okay, Michael says, is this a red flag? I was rejected for a role back in August, but yesterday the hiring manager called back. Okay, he said they couldn't find anyone and now need to settle for a lesser candidate. Well, I can tell you this person doesn't have a lot of interactive skills. The role's responsibilities are unchanged, but the title is downgraded with a 30% salary cut. Okay, now it's sounding like that's a tactic. Okay, so you say thoughts. Okay, so initially I thought that this person was just an idiot who doesn't understand etiquette or how to talk to people or might have no social skills, which is strange if they're the manager. It could be a new manager in operations, and I wouldn't be surprised. But generally, that's not the kind of thing you say to people, right? Then, after I finished reading it, I thought, like, okay, that might sound like a tactic because he's engaged in a salary negotiation, right? Now, this is kind of a sticky subject, okay? I did a collaboration a couple of days ago with several other awesome recruiters. There are good recruiters out there and there's bad recruiters out there. There's a lot of bad ones. There's a few good ones that know their stuff, but unfortunately, there's a lot of bad ones, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with them. I mean, I'm sure everyone has dealt with them. Now, the problem is that your relationship with the recruiter is very complex, okay? Sometimes they're your friend, you're working together, right? You want to help them to see your value because they're rooting for you. They want to hire you, right? And your goals align. You want to be hired. However, other times they are your opponent. They are your adversary. And probably the clearest example of that is in a salary negotiation. You want to get as much money as you possibly can out of them, and they want to get you for the least amount of money you would ever possibly accept. They look good if they spend less money on getting a talented person. Okay, they look like heroes to their bosses. And they're under pressure to not blow the entire budget on one or two people. Wouldn't it be great if instead of hiring 8 people, you could hire 10 people for the same amount of money? You know what I mean? So just like you want to save money when you go to the store, they want to save money when they're hiring people, right? The workforce is an expense. It's an expense. It's a cost. So you have completely diametrically opposite goals, right? So they are not your friend. They have a vested interest in pulling the wool over your eyes. So one of the things they're going to want to do is make you feel that you shouldn't get a lot of money for the role. So if they can convince you that this role just never pays a lot of money, that's good for them. If they can convince you that you're just not worth that much, that serves their interests, right? So they will say all kinds, it takes all kinds to make a world. Some people are very forthright and very, honest people. Others really aren't. And still others, it's not that they're dishonest, it's just that they're trying to negotiate. They're trying to push for what they want, right? So they may say things like this to you as a tactic to make you think like, oh, it looks like I'm not going to get a lot of money for this, so I better temper my expectations and not ask for too much. And behind the scenes, they're thinking, right? And they're thinking, yes, right? Score, or whatever you say, right? Bonus, whatever you say when, you're feeling smug and, maybe there's nobody else around and you can say what you want, as long as you don't cringe yourself to death. Whatever you say, that's what they're saying. Okay, so listen, it doesn't matter what these people say, and it doesn't matter what they think, okay? It doesn't matter. You take a job for the amount of money that makes sense for you. If you're absolutely desperate for a job and you need money now, you don't really have a lot of negotiating power. If, however, you're currently employed, you're making a decent, income, you don't have to leave if you don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be pressured into taking something that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? So you have to figure that out yourself. Okay? This is completely independent of what anybody says on the other end. You do your homework on what's a reasonable thing for you to get, and you test that with real world evidence. I did a video on this recently, okay? Right? And then it doesn't matter what these clowns say to you. They'll say anything under the sun if it gets you for a slightly lower amount of compensation. You know what I mean? I hate to admit it, but bosses do this. I mean, I've been a boss. It's a common thing to tell each employee, that you have, each direct report, you're one of our highest paid employees, right? It's a tactic. It makes everybody feel good. And they feel like they want to stay, and the morale goes up. It's all crap, right? And this could be another form of that. Okay. It's also a red flag that someone would say this kind of thing to you. That signals a few things about this person. They're calling you a lesser candidate. You know what I mean? That will rub a lot of the best employees the wrong way, That'll rub everyone the wrong way. Anyway. Okay, so moving on. Hopefully that makes sense. Julia says, I heard some interview took a whole of 10 months from start to sending an offer. It is a big science research supply company. Yeah, people are stupid in all kinds of new and exciting ways, and it would not surprise me. You could have had a process that takes years. You're thinking of maybe working there, you're talking to some people, but nothing really concrete happens, and then you go away and you come back, and the next year you talk to them again, Let's see here. David says, I was wondering, what is the motivation behind ghosting? Is it like for formalities and then to consider an internal candidate? Okay, listen, David. First of all, it takes all kinds to make a world. So there's going to be all kinds of things going on. It's not just going to be one thing all the time, right? But this is what I would say. This is a little bit, and it's understandable, this is a little bit of the spotlight effect. We think everything is about us, okay? We think that, it's a conscious decision not to get back to us, right? This is what I would say. In most cases, the reality is that they're not specifically paying attention to us. There's a lot of candidates that applied for the role. We're just one of possibly hundreds. And it's not personal. It's not something where they've decided to consider you specifically and how are they going to handle yours. Oh, they're not going to respond to you. No. What's usually going on is that they're too busy to send a no to the 499 candidates that didn't get selected, but they can send a yes to the one that they did select, right? Sending the yes is easy. You got to send out 6 to 8 emails, depending on how many people you're bringing in for interviews. And the hundreds of others, that's harder to send out those emails. It's easy to send 6 emails. It's hard to send out, 600 emails, right, to each email address that applied. Okay. So they usually skip that step because it doesn't add value for them. If they've already decided they're not proceeding with you, why would they spend more effort on you, right? That's how they're thinking. I'm not saying that I agree with that necessarily, but that's the logic behind this. Okay, so that's what's going on the other end. Okay, so it's not about you, it's about what's easiest for them. And if a lot of people applied for it, it might be impractical to do that. Some of these people are gloriously incompetent when it comes to technology. They don't know how to set up auto email scripts and things like this. So they can't write a little script that manually grabs the email address from a list, puts it in the subject, sends out a template, changes the name. You know what I mean? Some people can, and bam, there you go. It's automated. A lot of these people are generally not IT people or technical people. They don't know how to do that. So it's an imperfect process. So like I said at the beginning of the stream, don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with how qualified you are or how much effort or whatever went into your application or your communication style. It has nothing to do with those things. Don't assume it's some kind of response to those, because it's not. It's simply a response to what their situation is. You're welcome. I'm going to answer this one question, and I'm going to get on with the main topic of this live stream. Eugene says, I had a job interview last week on Wednesday, but one manager was not available, so his round was postponed till Friday. Today is the following Wednesday. Should I send a follow-up email now? there's no harm in it, but I wouldn't send like a big, long email going into all this detail. I would send like 2 sentences. I would just say, something to the effect of, I'm looking forward to our meeting. I just wanted to confirm we're set for Friday at 1 p.m. or whatever. Please let me know if there's any change. Thank you and have a great weekend. Something like that. Something very short. It says, I'm still here. I'm still interested. I'm still I'm showing you my awesome professional communication skills here, and I say nice things. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to meeting you all, something like that. That makes them feel, that's nice. It's very small, it's subtle, but it's there. That's all you need to do. Don't send a big long story like, I thought you wanted to meet me here, but then I heard that we're meeting here and I don't know. Does that mean this or does that mean that? Don't do that. Okay? But if you just send something short, there's no harm. It could even add a little thing to your case. It could give you that little boost, right? By signaling that you're still interested, you're still awesome. Neil says, you are a great mentor and a great man and a great manager. Well, thank you very much. That's very high praise. I think you just made my day, Neil. So thank you very much. It's awesome to see you here. Okay, let's move on to the main topic of this episode of How to Get Hired, which is the best answer to the job interview question, why do you want to work here? So if you go to a job interview and they ask you this question, so why do you want to work here? Right? Now, this is a classic example of let me give it to you straight here. This is a classic example of moronism. The problem with job interviews is that they are biased, but they're biased in ways that not a lot of people talk about. We're not talking about ethnicity or, sexual orientation or any of that stuff. We're talking about they're biased for a start. They're biased towards extroverts. Okay? Because a lot of the questions they ask, what they're really asking is not literally what they're saying. And this question is yet another example of that, right? Where they're saying these words, and if you take the words literally, you would fail the question because that's not what they're asking, right? Like for example, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? It's like if you were to interpret that question literally, you would probably come up with an answer along the lines of well, I can't predict where I'm going to be. And, it's kind of a silly question to ask now because where I'm going to be in 5 years will radically change depending on if you hire me or not. And you know more about the outcome of that decision than I do, it's just so strange. So once someone explains the question, they say, what they're really wanting to know is, is this the kind of work you would like to do long term? Note, of course, that they did not ask it. They did not phrase it literally like that. They asked you a sort of version that requires interpretation, right? This highly skews the results towards extroverts and people that can read context clues into questions and things. There's a lot of talented people out there that, maybe they're engineer types, maybe they're technical types. They don't do this. That's why they need training. And the first part of the training is for someone to explain what these questions are really asking, right? Because some of them are very hard to understand. Like, tell me about yourself. That could mean almost anything. So here's another one. Why do you want to work here? Best answer. Now, a lot of young people or people that have never, they haven't done a lot of interviews, they will most likely take offense at this question and say, well, that's a stupid question. Obviously, I want to work here so I can make money. I mean, hello. You want someone to work here? I need a job, so that's why I'm here. I mean, hello, Now, obviously, if you answer the question like that, you fail because that is not what they're asking. They're actually asking something a little less intuitive. Okay, so don't say, because I need a job, so I don't starve. That's a bad answer. Don't say, some people recommend you turn the question around, right? And like give a hostile answer, like, well, why should I want to work here? What's so great about this place that I'd want to work here? It's like, no, don't say that, right? Equally bad answer. Okay, we have to get those out of the way first, okay? What this question is really about is they want to see proof that you've researched this employer. That's what this question is about. So if they say, well, why do you want to work here? They want you to start talking and indicating that you know something about this company. So you would say something like, well, I know that you guys are leaders in this business, and I know that you have these products, and these products are good for this reason. And that's really exciting because the reason why those products are good, well, that's my area, So if I want to work for a company that really gets it when it comes to this and is on their A game at doing this stuff, I'd come here. You guys are the natural choice because you're crushing it based on your performance in this area. And that's the area that I have skills in, that I have a passion for, and that I have experience in. So it seems like a perfect fit. It seems like this would be the place to be, something like that. So you're indirectly saying, I know about you guys. I know who you are. I know what you do. I know why someone would presumably want to work here, right? And they say, okay, so you're not just applying to jobs blindly because you just need something. You specifically want to work for us. And if we can see that, now your stock goes up in our book, right? We think more favorably of you. We know you're not just applying to random jobs. You're here for a reason. And you've handpicked us because you specifically want to work here. And we like that, right? Like that's what the question is about, okay? So they also are under what I believe is a false assumption that the candidate that shows the most enthusiasm for the role is the one that will stay the longest. Okay, that is something that has been mentioned in the theory behind recruitment and selection. They're looking for someone that will give an overt display of passion and enthusiasm for the role, and or for the company, usually more towards the role, and they equate that with, you're more passionate about it, therefore you're a better fit, therefore you will stay the longest and perform best. You will not have issues of morale. You will not immediately start looking for another job once we hire you. So they're making all these assumptions simply based on the fact that you showed a lot of enthusiasm in the interview when answering questions like this. Okay? Once again, I would put forward that that's a false assumption. I haven't been able to get any data on that principle and several others. I don't know of any peer-reviewed studies that have confirmed that this is a thing. It's an assumption people make. I think that even if it was true in, say, 60% of cases, it turned out that this was true, you'd still get 40% of people that, they were the better candidate, but maybe they weren't extrovert and touchy-feely enough to send you that signal in the interview, so you didn't conclude that they'd be the best fit, right? But this is how recruiters think. And if you're trying to ingratiate yourself to recruiters and pass their sort of tests, you have to think like them and you have to embrace all these kind of things. Whether or not they apply to you or not. Maybe you are not a very enthusiastic person. You don't show it. You're not, cheering and crying and hugging and dancing and, right? You're not that type of person. Maybe you're just very reserved, but you feel everything on the inside. You just don't show it as easily as some other people. In which case, according to this test, you would be at a disadvantage. You would have to push yourself to give the reaction that maybe they're looking for once you realize they're looking for it. How's this for a monologue, by the way? So it's kind of dumb, but the answer to this question is they're looking for some form of flattery, not for the person, the individual, but for the organization. You know, they want to know that you know some stuff about the company and their products and, the role, and they want to hear flattering things. And that makes them feel good on a personal level, but it also, according to this theory, signals that you'd be a better fit. Okay. So a great way to answer is, I've talked about this before, is to say something along the lines of the "I want the job" thing. You have to say that at some point in the interview. It really is a great thing you can say. This would be the perfect opportunity to say that. Okay. So they say, well, why would you want to work here? And you say something along the lines of, listen, I want you to know that I want this job. And then you back that up. I want this job because you guys do this and you have a history of doing this. And that's what I do. And that's the approach that I've done throughout my career and that I embrace and I believe is the way forward. And you guys do that. So I see this as a natural place for someone like me. You know, I'm just making this up as I go along, but you would back up, I want this job, with reasons like that show you know about them. Okay. What I had written down was, I want this. You guys are the industry leader. My skill set fits perfectly to this role. And I'm excited to take that role into the future. Something like that. Some kind of mindless manager jargon like that. Or jargon, depending on your point of view. Yeah, now the only other thing I could say about this question is that it sounds very similar to a couple other questions. It sounds very similar to, why should we hire you? Okay, that sounds similar to, why do you want to work here? And there's a lot of overlap between those two questions, right? It also sounds similar to, why do you want this job? Right? Same kind of rules. Don't say, so I don't starve, right? Don't say, well, why would you want, why should I want this job? It's like, no, don't say that, right? Okay. For those questions, I recommend you back it up by saying, here's what I got, and my understanding is that you're looking for someone who has this. I have all those. So it's a platform for you to remind them that, I got all the things you're looking for, and plus I want to work here, right? Okay. So there's some overlap between those questions. I've done videos on all these questions. Go watch my videos on specifically how to answer these questions. I think you can get something from that. But that's what I have to say about this question. Why do you want to work here? Best answer would be, that's the perfect platform to say the whole "I want this job" thing, and then back it up by, showing that you know about them and how you fit, or how you have things that would work here, or how you have certain kinship with their approach or the way they do things. Okay, that's what I have to say. Okay, back to you guys in the chat here. Now, where do we leave off? Okay. Let's see here. I talked about that. We talked about... Did I answer the David thing about... I was wondering what the motivation behind ghosting is. Is it like for formalities and then to consider an internal candidate? No, there's no direct connection between ghosting a candidate and wanting to hire an internal candidate. Those are two completely separate things. Ghosting is something far more mundane. It is true that sometimes organizations will want to hire an internal candidate, but be forced to post the job publicly. That does happen in special situations, like in government. That's very common. Regardless of who they want to hire, they have to post the job officially, right? Now, a lot of companies don't have that rule, right? There's nothing forcing them to do that. They can hire someone without posting the job. There's no reason why they would have to post it if they don't want to. A lot of jobs get filled that way, right? Now, if that private company has been given tax breaks and all kinds of things from the government, then the government may saddle them with some of these rules, right? It depends. And it depends what country you're in and, all that kind of stuff. But most of the time, there are no rules where they have to post a job. So if they want to hire an internal candidate, they'll just hire the internal candidate. They'll just promote them. I find that stuff interesting. Generally, if you want status quo, you hire the internal candidate. If you want change, you hire an external candidate. Hiring an internal candidate is kind of like shooting yourself in the foot because, yes, you fill one vacant position, but because you moved someone into it, you've created another vacant position. So in the end, you're not really that much better off. You still have a position to fill, right? So there's a lot of things behind these decisions, but none of them have anything directly to do with ghosting. Ghosting is just how the recruiter chooses to conduct their business based on usually practical concerns. Eugene says, I had a job interview last week on Wednesday. One manager is not available, so his round was postponed. Okay, we talked about that, right? Yeah, I did all this. Thanks again to Nil. Julia says, as an introvert, I find it difficult to show enthusiasm, but not overpowering, to show that I'm easy to work with, but at the same time, not soft or incompetent. Tough task. Yeah, Julia, it can be done. It can be done. It's just you got to learn things, learn behaviors, and practice doing them because they probably don't come naturally to you, but you can do them. I mean, you're not incapable. It's just, you don't realize things naturally. You don't behave a certain way naturally, but in some social situations, the etiquette is for you to behave that way. Usually it's because it gives a better impression to others, right? So for example, let's say you organize an event, a meeting or something, and you've invited 6 people to your meeting. And maybe a couple of those people, they don't deal with you regularly. Like, you hardly know them. Now, you show up for the meeting, they show up for the meeting. Now, you might feel that, like, okay, it's not that special that these people showed up for the meeting. We both work for the same company. I requested that they attend for a legitimate work-related reason. As part of their job, they need to respond to these kinds of requests. So it's not that much to ask, and it's not that much of a favor that they're doing me by showing up to the meeting, right? Okay, so that might be the situation, and you're absolutely right if you feel that way. In turn, you don't feel particularly bubbly and enthusiastic about the fact they showed up. You just consider it a matter of course that they showed up, right? But perhaps the right thing to do in that situation would be to show a lot more enthusiasm and gratitude. And when they show up to the room, say, hey, wow, you came. Thank you for coming here. It's great that you're here. And I do appreciate you taking the time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to come and do this. So, thank you. Welcome. Shake their hand, like that kind of thing, right? Now, maybe you don't feel like doing that because you don't feel it's justified. But etiquette would dictate that you would do that to make these people feel welcome, to make them feel like, oh, well, thank you very much. It's so nice that you're so enthusiastic that I did show up. Now I'm much more willing to engage and much more excited about hearing what's going to happen, And I like you now, and I specifically want to work with you going forward if you're like this. So you got to sort of force yourself sometimes, and a job interview is no different. You got to show enthusiasm, and you got to resist the temptation to call them on some of the stupid things that they might ask you. You know what I mean? Or maybe them being less than professional or rude. Like somebody mentioned earlier with a manager that told them that they were an inferior candidate, before they've even gotten the job, right? It's like the opposite of that. right? I've got a soft spot for a lot of introverts. I feel being an introvert myself, I feel that introverts often get the short end of the stick when they're in things like job interviews, when they're meeting people for the first time, making a first impression, and we all judge by appearances because that's the only thing we have to judge by as a first impression. You know? That's just human nature. That's the reality of the world. You know what I mean? Extroverts have the opposite problem. Generally speaking, they make a good first impression. But in my experience, over time, that first impression, that good first impression, is eroded more. Now that you get to know them, now that you get to work with them, now they're not all they're cracked up to be, right? Obviously, this is very general, but that's kind of the cliched way this goes. Zara says, what if you are new to the industry and have no or little skills in that, only some courses or LinkedIn courses completed? I don't know. What if that? Like, in order for you to know what to do, in order for me to be able to tell you maybe perhaps what to do, I would have to know your goals. What are you trying to do? Like, are you trying to get a job in it at the entry level? Are you talking to recruiters about this? Are you going for an internship? Are you trying to network? You know what I mean? Like, in order to know what to do, I need to know more about what your situation is and what you're trying to do. Everyone starts somewhere. So, I mean, God knows I did. Everyone here has started somewhere. You start with zero, and then you add to that, right? So it's not necessarily a problem if you're starting from scratch or you're starting with very little. You know what I mean? It's just how you do it. Julia says, 9 years ago, I got rejected by a job to someone with zero experience. It was very tough for me to move on. I finally asked the manager, and she told me that the other candidate was more personable. Yeah, exactly. You see, no, listen, Julia, okay, I'm really glad you brought this up, okay? Because this is a tremendous learning experience for everyone here, okay? In a good way, right? Now, think about the flip side of this, okay? Think about that candidate that didn't have your experience or your ability, but yet they were hired over you because they were more personable, right? Think about that for a second. Now, I have found, and I've said this recently, that whenever I talk about networking as a means to get hired, as a way to create opportunities for yourself, I find it's a very tough sell, especially to the YouTube crowd, because a lot of people, they are either just completely close-minded to it. They think that, they could never do it in any way. Or they think it's this unethical, underhanded, slimy kind of thing that only elites do or something. It's like, those are both very, very wrong, okay? And the reason I can say this is because I've done this my whole career. I've been the CEO. I've built a consulting business most recently doing networking to a bunch of people I didn't know that were all CEOs of companies in my hometown and surrounding region. This is a very real thing. And I'm a technical introvert, and I learned the skills of how to do this. It doesn't come naturally. But once you learn a little basic things about people, you can do this. Now, here's an example of it, right? For everyone to see, right in front of everyone's face. Somebody who's more personable got hired over somebody that, had actual skill. Okay? Let's accept that as what actually happened here. Why is it that they can sort of just get in there with being more personable? I'll tell you why. It's because being personable, what is referred to here as being personable, which I would interpret as having social skills and interaction skills and knowledge of etiquette, having maybe possibly better communication skills or presentation skills or public speaking skills, all those soft skills, right? Those are a lot more important than people think, especially introverts. Introverts have a blind spot. They don't value this stuff themselves. So they make the assumption that it's not that important. And it's incorrect. It's actually very, very important. And here's an example of it right in front of everybody's face. This person who had nothing but social skills managed to get the job, whereas the technically qualified introvert didn't, right? It's cosmetic. It's really not that hard to develop these skills. It's not like this person is a rocket scientist that knows more than you and has capabilities that you couldn't do, Julia. It's just that they exhibited these, or at least they demonstrated them in the interview. You know? Now, listen, I'm here to tell you, you can learn all the stuff that they do and you can behave like them on cue when you need to. Okay? I'm a big proponent of the Myers-Briggs personality test and type indicator. Not a lot of people are. It used to be more of a thing in the past. Now they've ruined it by adding a bunch of hocus pocus crap to it and then concluded that the whole thing is worthless. No, it talks about introverts and extroverts for a start. And the definition is introverts can do social interaction, it's just they don't enjoy it. Extroverts can do social interaction, but they do enjoy it. That's how they recharge their battery, right? You can do this stuff. You just have to learn how to do it and then practice it a bit. And you can blow these people out of the water. You know, or at least you can certainly compete head to head. You know, certainly in very carefully controlled exchanges like a job interview, right? Job interview is already artificial enough. I mean, what's the harm in learning a few behaviors that are not natural to you, like showing enthusiasm, and then sort of doing it on cue? It shows you how stupid these processes actually are and how flawed they are, you know? But you could do it. Julia says, it's also impossible to send hundreds of rejection emails out one by one, taking a long time to do, but will result in nothing. Yes. Sunil, if I'm saying that right, says, I'm a new subscriber here. Please create a video skill visa. What? UK skill visa. I don't even understand what that is. Sorry. If you could maybe rephrase that in a way I can understand, I will answer your question. You're welcome, Julia. Bob says, the book How to Work a Room by Susan will help me as introvert. Okay, great. I'm not familiar with that book. I mean, I'm not generally a fan of like the sort of self-help or business coffee table books that people write. It's like everyone and their brother has written the book. I remember a few years ago, people were like, you know, talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was like everywhere. And, you know, I would go and I'd meet someone. I'd go have dinner with somebody, some business person, and they talk about this damn book. And then other people would talk about it. And then I got on YouTube and people were talking about it. Anyway, that person seems to have fallen from favor recently. I was asked on one of these live streams like a couple of years ago, you know, what do you think of that book? And I said, well, you know, I mean, I know finance, and he's recommending something that violates kind of a lot of the basic principles of finance. So I'm not really into it, to be honest with you. But I did read the book, basically because of peer pressure, because everyone's talking about it. I read it. So I'm not a fan of these things. There are some good ones out there. The Dale Carnegie stuff that he wrote like hundreds of years ago or whatever. Those are still really good, you know, but there's a lot of crap, you know, people like accountants giving you their take on how to succeed in business. And it's like, yeah, it's true up to a point, but the problem is you're only getting one side of the story. You know, accountants don't have the answers to how to sell a product. You know, any more than salespeople have the answers to what your capital structure should be. You know what I mean? Like you need more than that. The best books are where people who have done great things tell you the story of how it happened. That's my opinion. Not a sort of advice kind of book. It's more like, this is what we did. This is why we did it. This is how it turned out. You know, I find that's the best type of book, but that's just me. Julia says, you're right, Bill. At the time I was focusing on technical skills because it was a technical job, but the managers think techniques can be trained. It was an eye-opening experience for me. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a problem. Now, sometimes that's true. Okay, sometimes that's true. But people who are not technical, this is what I've learned over my life. And once again, this is a very cynical point of view, but but I have had it demonstrated to me on occasion. A lot of people who aren't technical, they themselves have decided not to go into a technical type career, but they at the same time look down upon people who have gone into a technical career for two reasons. Number one, they think all those people don't have all the social skills that I have, and a lot of times they're right. Number two, they look down on them because they think, technical skills, they're overrated. You could just train people, right? It's like, no, that's not true. And you can see that quite obviously if you look at the world objectively, right? But they have a blind spot for that. And they don't really see how valuable some of those skills actually are. But like, that's their blind spot. But then, like we talked about before, introverts have their blind spot, which is they underestimate the value of social skills. That's where they lose. So if you're an introvert that gets it, you realize, look, I'm not great at social skills. It doesn't come naturally to me. I don't like social interaction for its own sake, but I realize that it is pretty damn important. By having stories like Julia just shared with us, by having seen that with my own eyes, I realize that some of these social skills are quite important. If for no other reason than they make a great first impression, and things like job interviews, for example, are all about first impressions. Sales are a lot about first impressions too, right? A lot of things in life are about first impressions. So I recognize how they're very useful. The next step is to realize that, like, look, the other great thing about having social skills and interacting with people is that it makes you more powerful. Because if you don't have the answer to something, you can get it by picking up the phone. The answer is a phone call away for anything, because you have a friend who knows that. Any question with this, you call them. Any question with that, you call this other person. And you know them, and they like you, and they'll help you, right? That's the other element of it, right? So maybe this person doesn't have great technical skills themselves, but maybe they're friends with 10 other people who, between them, have very fierce technical skills. So they can get things done, right? Who knows? But that's another thing that happens. Okay, Gabriel. I know Gabriel. Gabriel's been here before. Hi, Bill. Hope you are okay. I have a job right now. Got it recently. I am in Italy, and I would love to work for other countries as a consultant. Any cool ways to market yourself as a programmer? First of all, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the Leaning Tower of Pisa, because it's Italy, right? It's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's Venice, right? And Rome, but like Rome, the Vatican, it's Vatican City, right? That's its own little country there. Am I allowed to say Leaning Tower of Pizza? I guess I'm not. Anyway, that's enough for my insensitive sort of Italy jokes. Listen, Gabriel, you're awesome. I once worked in the software business like decades ago. What I know about that stuff is completely obsolete, but here's how you find out. Do informational interviews with people who know that stuff, okay? You can find out the very specific information of absolutely anything you want to know about every industry, any industry right now, by knowing how to reach out and set up some informational interviews with the people that know that stuff, okay? So if you're in Italy and you want to work as a consultant and you want to market yourself as a programmer, so you want to consult on programming to people in other countries. That's something very specific, okay? Now, I've done many videos, I've talked about this many times, between Google Maps and between LinkedIn, you have all the tools you need to discover people around you that would know that stuff, that they currently work in the IT business and they consult internationally. You know what I mean? And like if that's what you're looking for, you can find those people using a combination of Google Maps and LinkedIn. Google Maps finds you the organization, and LinkedIn sees inside the organization to the individuals and allows you to reach out to them. And then you send out all kinds of requests for informational interviews, right? You say, hey, I'd love to get your expert opinion on this industry, international consulting and, on IT development. Would I be able to get half an hour of your time? Would that be possible? Right? Now, a lot of people won't respond, but some people will. The response might be 5%, but if you send out 100 of these template requests, you can get 5 people that say, hey, yeah, I'll come down. And I don't know the answers to these very specific questions, especially for someone in Italy, but they do because they're living it. They're doing it. You can ask them anything you want because they're doing the thing that you aspire to do, okay? Ask them about the industry. Ask them about their past. Ask them about their recommendations for someone wanting to do the same thing. You know what I mean? It could even lead to a job with them, or it can lead to a networking opportunity where they recommend you for a job somewhere else. This is how you start. And the more you do of these, the more you will learn about it, the more connections you'll make, and the further you'll go. Okay, so learn how to do that. Now, to try and steer you in the right direction, if you don't know, in the description box of this video, I have a link to a video I did called How Successful People Get Jobs. Watch that video. That talks specifically about what it looks like doing this. Then if you really want to go deeper, you can check out that course, okay? If you haven't already done so. That's the Get Hired course. So for everybody who wants to know how to do this, I put the whole procedure with templates and everything, all the principles, all one at a time. They're all in that course, okay? So check out that course. There's a link in the description if you want to really go deep and get the full sort of teaching on how to do this stuff. Because there's a lot to it. I can't just say it all in 5 minutes. So that's what I recommend. And if you do that, you can get all the specific information you want that applies to you in your country, in the specific thing you're trying to do. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we can get to the end of this feed. How do you say this? Ekran says, is it good to show passion for your job, or will they take advantage and make smaller salary increases? Well, in what context? What are we talking about? In a job interview for another job? If you're in a job interview for another job, and you're asking about showing passion for that job that you're going for, yes, it is obviously the thing you want to do. It doesn't backfire. There's no advantage to not showing enthusiasm for the job you're going for under any scenario. Okay? It doesn't matter what salary increases they offer. It doesn't. Okay? The only thing that matters is what makes sense for you. And then you say yes or no. You know what I mean? If you don't know all the principles, you might not understand how that's true, but it is. Okay? I can't tell you the amount of times that people, I've been on the phone with people or whatever, and they would say, well, here's what we pay, for this. And I say, well, here's what I need. And they say, well, yeah, but here's what we pay. And then I say, okay, well, I'll get back to you. And then hang up. Right? Because you may want to give me that much money, but no, that doesn't make sense for me. So then I guess we're not going to have a transaction, But if you do want a transaction, I need this. Right? And I know that because other people will pay me that much. You know what I mean? To do whatever it is. I've had this discussion about jobs. I've had this discussion about contract work, consulting work. You know what I mean? It's what you're worth because it's what other people are offering to pay you and will pay you. So if you have a job offer for 50 and somebody says, no, well, we pay 30. And it's okay, great. Well, okay, well, goodbye, because I need 50, like I said, You're not just going to say, well, we pay 30, and you're just going to say, okay, I guess I'll only make 30. It's like, no, right? I'm worth 50 because I have other job offers for 50, or I have other contract work coming in for 50, right? That's how it works. Right now, if nobody's lining up to pay you 50, how can you say you're worth 50? You know what I mean? And they say, well, we pay 30, and the only offer you have is this offer for 30. How can you conclude that you're worth anything other than 30 in that case, right? So the key is to go out and get those other opportunities, get those other offers, right? And then it doesn't matter what anybody says. You know where you stand, and you never have to accept anything that doesn't make sense for you. That's how negotiation works. It's not about persuasion. These people intentionally will not be persuaded because they're pushing for getting you as cheap as possible. Bob says, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is gold. Yes, I think that was like the 5th or 6th video I did on this YouTube channel. Like, I think I'm on video number 700 or something, but like video number 5 was my 3-minute review of that book. So yeah, it's a good book. It's probably the best business book out there. It stood the test of time. Alexander K says, you mentioned networking as a search tool, a job search tool, and I wonder if there is an interesting job posting online. Does it make sense to try networking? No, absolutely not. You are coming in too late. You got that right. It would be too late because it's not networking anymore. It's like you're applying for the posted job, right? Why are you contacting them? It's to apply for the posted job, right? Now you can pretend and try and fool them and say, I just want to be friends, or I just want some information from you, but it's a lie, and they can probably see right through that, right? You're really contacting them because you want that job, right? In which case they'd probably say, well, stop this and go apply through the proper channels so that you can go in the front door with 1,000 other people and be compared side to side with them, right? Yeah, you network for hidden jobs. I hate that term. Everyone hates that term. They're jobs that are there. They're not hidden. It's just that they're not posted publicly, so they're hard to discover. You can discover them by talking to people, right? Oh yeah, I've got to hire another person for my team. Yeah, I just got the approval last week. So at some point I got to find another person. I don't know if I'm going to hire a recruiter. I don't know if I'm going to post it, or just ask around. I'll see, right? But you see, that job is there and you're discovering it, but you'd have to talk to that person. You can't do an internet search and find that job, right? So I have a video called Hidden Job Market, or the Hidden Job Market. I think it's linked in the description box below. Check that out. There are more hidden jobs than there are posted jobs. All the posted jobs you see, all those jobs that you see when you look on the internet, that's something in the nature of 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. Most people get hired for jobs that are not posted, and they get the most popular way of being hired is networking. Now, if this is shocking or surprising to you, because it is to some young people, don't take my word for it. Go out and research the stuff on your own, and you'll see. Okay. The reason why people are always left with that perspective is because the people talking about hiring usually tend to be recruiters, and recruiters have a conflict of interest in telling you don't go through a recruiter to get hired. You know what I mean? That's one flaw with this system. I'm not a recruiter. I've taught recruiters in university, and I've hired people, and I've been a hiring manager. But I'm not a recruiter, so I'm not necessarily plugging that you should go through a recruiter. Some people choose to, and it can work out really well. Some people choose to, and it works out less well. Some people tend to go through networking. As you climb higher in your career, you will most likely get jobs through networking the higher you go. Entry-level jobs are a lot of, like maybe 50% of them are posted. But like executive jobs, maybe 5% of them are posted, something like that, right? So, but networking for professional jobs it's the number one reason why people get hired. Okay, I really got to get to the end of this and then wind this down. Alexander says, in my case, there is an alumnus from my business school working there, and she may also be the hiring manager, so I'm thinking if I should contact her or just apply. Well, why don't you do both? What you could do is, look, there's many ways you could do this. One way is to contact her first and say, hey, it's me. I see that you've got this job. Does it make sense for me to apply? You know, like I have this, and this. Does it make sense for me to apply for this job? And see what she says, right? That would be a pretty simple thing to do. And then whether you hear back from her or not, you just go ahead and apply. It would be nice if she responded and then you said, okay, well, based on that, I will apply. Thank you. You know, but whether or not she does, you apply anyway. What's the harm? If you want to really go deeper on that, you could try and get an informational interview and say like, hey, we were together in this school or whatever. Can I pick your brain? Can you spare me 30 minutes of your time? Let's talk about this. I got some questions for you about your company, or not your company, maybe your industry, or maybe, the future of this industry, something like that. And it's an excuse for you guys to get together. Don't necessarily name drop that you got the job, or maybe you want to. There's no right or wrong way, but that can lead to something. And if she does see you as a contender, you would jump to the top of the pile because you're the only applicant that she's met face to face. Or if that's true, then you would jump to the top of the pile. You have a clear edge over any stranger that's applying that she hasn't met yet. Yeah. You're welcome, Alexander. You said thank you, so you're welcome. Gabriel, thank you for your point of view. Also, yeah, I had been there years ago when I was looking for jobs. I remember your channel began actually useful. It is crazy how much bad advice there is out there. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem with giving advice. And the other thing is that, like, this stuff, the world of employment, I mean, there's so many different situations you could be in. You could be at any level, in any industry, in any country, dealing with any kind of person. You know what I mean? So it's very hard to give blanket advice that will always work for everyone. It's very hard, There are some recruiters out there giving you very good advice about how to give a recruiter what they want, right? And a lot of that is very good. Some of it isn't, because, as I've mentioned, sometimes the recruiter is not your friend. They are your opponent, your adversary. Just like salary negotiation, you have opposite goals. So sometimes the advice that recruiters give in those situations is, in my opinion, very self-serving. It's like they're teaching you to play right into the recruiter's hand. When we ask you, what is your weakness? Be honest and just give us your weakness. All we want to know is that you're working on. It's like, yeah, right. I've seen that backfire. I've seen that not be the case. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's some kind of weird stuff going on too. So I agree with you. And thank you for your kind words. That's very high praise. I appreciate it. I'm glad it was useful. Julia, how does it happen that the employer withdraws the offer after you try to negotiate a higher salary? All kinds of things can happen. Okay. For example, it's not about you. Maybe they get their quarterly results. It turns out that they're not doing so well. They don't have as much money to spend. So, emergency. Everybody rein in your spending now. All departments, there's a freeze on optional spending, including new hiring. Right? So, that's one situation that does happen. That has nothing to do with what you're doing. It's just coincidence, right? So it can happen for a variety of reasons. I told you, I said at the beginning of this stream, I did a video years ago about one of my experiences being a candidate for a job, having done 9 interviews to get a job, which you would never do. But we got halfway through the process and the recruiter left the company. And so they didn't tell me anything. They just left. And so they ghosted me. I was ghosted. So I did call the company and said, like, is this the end of the process or what's going on? And they said, oh, it's good that you called because that person left. So we're still like in process of filling that role. So it's good, yes, we're continuing. So it takes all kinds. People can leave. Managers that approved new jobs can leave. And all of a sudden the new job is left hanging out to dry. All kinds of things. Lemon Tart says, "Hi Bill, I'd like you to make a clip about salary negotiation if possible." Oh, I have many. Just do a search for the company's expert salary and you'll see like there's tons of stuff on my channel. Yeah, and on top of that, I've got lots of live streams where I've talked about it. So, but yeah, I've got a lot of stuff. But it's a topic people want me to keep covering, so I will do more. Gabriel says, "I remember you speaking about the hidden job market years ago. It was mind-blowing the first time I heard about it." Yeah. Like, this is the thing. It really, a lot of things I say, it's surprising. People think like, wow, that's amazing. That's so cool what you just said. I'm going to do that. And then other things I say and people go, no, that's crap. Surely that can't be true. No, I refuse to believe that that's true. You get like all kinds, right? And the hidden job market is something where I've learned that you get the most pushback. A lot of people just refuse to accept that it's a thing, or they refuse to accept that they could actually benefit from it in some way, So very strange, very, very strange. Okay, we've gotten to the end of the feed. So that's where I'm going to leave stuff here. I'm actually doing another live stream in like half an hour. So I'm going to be back in half an hour. But in the meantime, check out that course. Okay. If you are wanting to get hired, check out that course. If you are wanting to get hired and move up into management, check out that course. Okay. That's what that course is for. That will give you some of the skills you need to be considered for those roles. It's not just about technical skills. You got to tack on a bunch of other things. And if you don't have them, it can stand in the way of your career progressing. So if that's you, check that out. Check this out. If you just want to get hired and you're not going anywhere fast with your job search, these are links in the description box below the video feed here. So check those out. I've also made videos that are like FAQ, frequently asked questions, about these courses so that you know exactly what you're getting into and what it'll do for you and all that kind of stuff, how it works, etc. So check all that stuff out. I will be back in half an hour where we're going to really get into the, the reality of employment and recruiting and hiring and all that stuff. I do a live stream called HR Nitrous. So come back for that because we're going to really get into it. Thanks so much for being here. You guys are awesome. Check out those courses. I will be back next week at the same time with another episode of How to Get Hired. Take care.